Hello. So today I wanted to discuss some of my hot takes or potentially controversial opinions on veganism as someone who's been practicing veganism to the extent that is reasonable in my life for the past 10 years. And I want to explore these things because I think there is value to it. I'm not trying to get people angry with this video. I'm going to be honest, I am a little bit nervous making this because I know that people can get defensive about food choices and topics related to ethics and morality. I know veganism is kind of a loaded topic for some people. My goal with this is not to make people upset. I want to explore areas that I believe have nuance. And I have so greatly appreciated every time that I see a creator talking about similar things. If we aren't able to discuss things, question things, and explore nuance, veganism feels a little too culty for me. And I also think it's important and valuable to talk about these things for people who are maybe interested in reducing their consumption of animal products or like limiting their consumption, or they're curious, but maybe they find the idea of veganism intimidating. I am not somebody who believes in perfection in terms of veganism. I think it's really important to talk about ways that we cannot be perfect. Sometimes these labels for things like vegetarian and vegan and plant-based, I think they can sometimes come with their own baggage, their own associations, and that can prevent some people from actually trying to reduce, actually considering reducing, because they do sometimes come with baggage. Sometimes veganism does feel like a loaded term. Like I said, I felt kind of nervous about making this video because I know there is baggage with saying that you're vegan. So first, I just want to give you some context in terms of my motivations for eliminating animal products from my diet, from my lifestyle as reasonable. So with my motivations, I'm actually going to throw in a little hot take. So for me, I was motivated by more than one factor. And it actually took several different factors coming at me, making sense for me to change my mind. So I do not know if I would have made the decision to try to eliminate the consumption of animal products if ethical concerns were my only motivator. If they were the only thing that I was ever aware of, I don't know that I would have been convinced. I don't even know if I would have kept with things as consistently if it was just my concern for animals. I know that there are some vegans who might totally disagree with me, who might totally think I'm not vegan because I'm saying that, but I'm gonna be honest, one motivator I don't think would be enough for me. So, yes, for me, there was the ethical side of things where I learned more about how animals are treated. I kind of thought a little bit more about it. I am not somebody who likes the idea of causing unnecessary harm to any living being if unnecessary, right? Like if I don't have to. I don't like it. And I know that I felt ickier about consuming animal products that I was closer to the chain of production from. So, I remember as a kid being really icked out by the idea of eating deer meat or meat that somebody had, caught. That to me was too close to the animal and, tasted too animal for me. But we're so conditioned to not see these other types of meat as being associated to the animal. There's this disconnect that we can have. So there was some kind of connecting the dots and stuff like that that was happening and still is a big motivator for me. For me, there were also environmental concerns. Animal agriculture is not great for the environment. There's concerns about deforestation, monocultures, greenhouse gas emissions, water contamination, water usage. All of these things are environmental concerns. And then there's also a health standpoint that I have on this stuff. And I'm not making blanket health statements in terms of a vegan diet is the healthiest diet for everyone. No, that's not my vibe at all. Um, but there were some personal health motivators for me that made sense for me. But then there is also health in a more public health perspective that motivates me as well. So for the personal health side of things, there is a history of heart disease in my family. So it's something that I want to try to be able to reduce if possible for myself, the risk of. So it was at the time, like, when I was really kind of learning about this stuff, it seemed to make sense that it might be something that would reduce my risk a little bit. And then just by the nature of the budget that I was on for groceries and what was available to me, I would be eating less processed food, especially when I was transitioning into veganism. It would be easier for me to make healthy choices. But there's also the more public health concerns that are a motivator for me as well, like antimicrobial resistance. So we do not want to have antimicrobial resistance in humans, and we also do not want to have that in animals. And animals are fed a lot of antibiotics. In livestock, there's a lot. So for me, that is freaky. There's also concerns about things like zoonotic diseases, transferring pathogens from humans to animals. Other environmental health concerns around things like concentrated animal feeding operations or factory farms include things like concerns about our water for safety, including things like our air quality and the odors that are in the air near these places, and how that also affects the people living around these areas. Like, they are living in an area where it does not feel good to be outside. So their lifestyle may also become more sedentary. They might be going outside less. There's also concerns about things like insect vectors. Another aspect of my motivation is related to humans, my concern for humans, particularly in the relation to slaughterhouses, meat processing plants. Those conditions are terrible. They are awful. I do not wish that upon anyone. The sights, the smells, the mental shit that people have to go through working in those places. There's high rates of injury. Oftentimes, these places are employing migrant workers. Why do we think that is? Because it's so fucking shitty, is probably a pretty good guess. There's also prison labor that is being done. And like, there's this type of prison labor is happening for other types of food as well. But I think it's a special type of terrible to have anybody forced into an environment like that. The physical and mental demands of a job like that. I know that there's a lot of approaches that different places have towards how they treat incarcerated criminals, but forcing them to work in a meat processing plant is like, I don't think that's doing anybody any good. I do not. And there's also a lot of concerns for disease spread in environments like that. During the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic, there were quite a lot of concerns being voiced because of how many workers were getting infected with COVID-19, disproportionately so from the general population. So that just gives you a little bit of context in terms of my motivations, what keeps me motivated with this stuff. And I think, truthfully, that having several different motivators is very helpful. You know, having a little bit of selfish motivator, having a little bit of care for other people, other animals. I think it is so important to look at these things from a little bit more of a wide lens. Like, it makes sense from many different angles, in my opinion. Let's get into the hot takes and controversial opinions. I think that sometimes the way that vegans talk about the ethical side of things can be divisive and can make it less approachable for some people. It's so firm on the like animals not for exploitation, any use of animal products equals exploitation. I think a lot of people have different understandings of what the the relationship with like humans and animals. And I don't even think vegans always agree with this stuff, like in terms of what is exploitation, what is not, in terms of what is okay, what is not. I think more people will be on board with the idea that things like factory farming are fucked up and unethical. That is just something that no animal, no living being should be subject to. And I think having more conversations on that, especially given how such a huge percentage of animal products, of meat, is coming from factory farms. I think starting the conversation there, starting with what's fucked up about that, and really the percentages of that, how many different systems are messed up because of that. And then we can kind of have stepwise conversations about some of the other aspects. I think that would probably be a little more approachable for people. It's not as focused on like the ethics that not everyone will agree with. I think more people would agree that they don't want their meat to be tortured basically their whole life and then be killed. Like, I think there is an understanding that that sounds shittier than living their life in an area where they can kind of free roam and stuff like that and then get killed at the end of that life. Granted, a lot of vegans will say, well, that animal didn't want to be killed. Animal was just living its life, didn't want to be killed. That wasn't its choice. Um, and I totally get that. But I also see that not everyone is going to agree with that. Not everyone is going to agree with that side of things for the ethical arguments. By making things so black and white, I think we do make it a little harder for people to have conversations about this stuff. So we live in a world, we live in a time where it is extremely hard to consume anything completely ethically. Um, we are stuck choosing between shitty options and other shitty options. It is nearly impossible to eat or buy things completely ethically. There's exploitation of workers everywhere. There's corners being cut. There's just shit everywhere that is making things terrible. And I don't think like most vegans are not oblivious to that. I don't think. Like, I think most vegans understand, like, yes, there is unfortunately exploitation in things like how we get our phones these days. There's so much that we can try to use our like buying power for or against, but ultimately there may be no perfect answer in the structures that we are in. So for me, veganism is like trying to opt out of some obvious exploitation, but also acknowledging that we cannot eliminate it all. And I think we need to talk about more about how we all are stuck in a system where like making ethical decisions all day long is exhausting. It's impossible sometimes. I think we have to talk about how veganism is not perfection. Veganism can never be perfect. There is like if we think of like human exploitation that we have no way of tracking in terms of just produce, like vegetables, fruit, we don't know what exploitation has happened in those instances. So it's just trying to opt out of at least an obvious system of exploitation to me. We cannot opt out of all parts of exploitation. That's just the reality of this world. I also really hate when vegans talk about veganism as being only a willpower thing, or even some other people will like dismiss veganism as like a thing that they could never do because they don't have the willpower. And I don't really think it is, and I don't think it's one of those things we should be saying, well, if you wanted to, you would. From how we are with other decisions, with other things that we want to do, like look at exercise, how like hard it can be to exercise, even though we can know it's very good for us, we can know that there are lots of benefits for it, but it's hard to actually do, even if you do have a desire to. I think what is more important than willpower is having willingness and also having systems in place for you to be able to do these things. Like, if you have never intentionally made vegan meals before, it's not willpower only. It is needing to learn how to cook this way. It is needing to gain an understanding of like what your new staples can be, being willing to like try different recipes, but being willing to try to see what you can find in certain situations. So for me, it's more about having like resources and systems and that willingness to take these little steps. And that alone, like even if you look at things like Veganuary and like the premise of that basically being like for people who've been like, well, I like the idea, but I don't know if I could commit to that. Having a month-long time to be willing rather than focused on willpower, I think is beneficial for people, even giving it a try. There can be times that veganism can feel isolating. Um, and I don't think pretending that that does not exist is going to help anybody. I think we should acknowledge that it can be isolating to feel like you are not fitting into the norm, that you are being annoying, that you are frustrating the people that you're around because of your food choices. Like, even people who are respectful of your choices, like, it can still feel like a burden for them to try to accommodate you. Even if that's not how they feel or anything like that, that can be felt internally sometimes. There can be aspects of isolation, right? There can be times where it's hard to see all these reasons to not consume animal products and know that there are a lot of people who are. Another thing I really dislike is when vegans overstate the health benefits of veganism, the proven health benefits. Um, Yes, like I talked about, there are health concerns in terms of just using animals, especially in the environments that we are now. And there's also been some studies that do suggest some concerns in relation to more personal health stuff, but I just hate when anyone is like overstating the health claims of things. And I think it's just like harmful. Like like not everybody is going to feel healthier. Some people are definitely not going to if they are not set up for success in terms of like how to have a balanced vegan diet. And like I think it depends too on like how you ate before, how you eat now, how much processed food you are eating in this vegan diet, how many of these like processed meat alternatives are you having, how frequently are you having them. Like I think there's a lot of things to look at with that stuff. In general, I didn't notice like any big health changes for myself. It's not something that everybody notices a difference with, and some people initially might feel worse when they are eating more plant-based foods, especially if they have not been eating that many. Like that's a fiber adjustment. It's things for your microbiome to be adjusting to. So people may not feel the greatest initially when they're getting into eating more plant-based. So I think it's important to set people's expectations in a fair way. I think it's really important that we also kind of building off of that note about the health claims is like, I think we need to not be overly simplistic in how we talk about substitutions. Because I've seen some people just be like, well, just substitute whatever like non-vegan thing with a vegan alternative. And that can sometimes work, but the satiation level, what is actually in that alternative can vary in terms of caloric density, in terms of protein content. Something like eggplant or like mushroom or jackfruit, when those are used as a like meat replacement, the the like taste might be okay, the taste might be fine, but it also will not fill you the same way. You might want to add some extra things to make that more satiating. You might want to add some more things to your meal to make it a little bit more balanced. I think it's so, so important that we talk about stuff like that we make sure that people are not just like willy-nilly subbing like for like all the time, because sometimes I think that could set people up to fail. I think that could set people up to feeling like they are not thriving because they are eating what feels like the same amount of food, even though the things that are in that food can be very different. But I also think that it's important that we do remember that there are many things that can affect our health. So mental, physical, social health, like these are all things. And while a vegan diet can be nutritionally healthy at all stages of life, that does not inherently mean that it is healthy for every single person. Healthy depends on several different factors. There is not one thing. And so the social side of things, the mental health side of things, the physical health side of things are all things to consider. Um, so those things are not just determined by nutrition. Those things are not just measured by the food that you put into your body. So I think it's something we should be mindful of when we are talking about health and veganism, especially in relation to people who maybe don't feel like vegan is doable for them because of their health. Just going off of what can nutritionally work for people is not going to determine completely what works for individuals. I also don't know that I love the idea of documentaries being touted in the way that they are by some vegans for like convincing people to go vegan. Um, it feels a little lazy to me. It also, I get that, like, it's easier to watch something together than to like have to orchestrate the whole conversation and research stuff or whatever. It can sometimes be easier for people to listen to facts and stuff through a documentary to learn that way. But like there's so many things that are unreliable with documentaries, and they can be super biased. There can be cherry picking of quotes and data. I just it doesn't really sit that well with me that that's like an approach that some people have. I just feel like it's like if you can find a few little flaws with the documentary, then it can be hard for that whole documentary to still have merit for some people. I don't know. I'm not big on it. I think I prefer the idea of like a book or an article or something that's in writing that has trackable sources, maybe does have some pictures and videos, but like where you can get to where the information is from a little bit more easily, and it might not have the same type of, like, appeal to people's emotions and kind of traumatize them vibe. Another thing that drives me bonkers is when vegans will see somebody who used to identify as vegan talk about how they no longer identify as vegan, and often the response is, "Well, they were never vegan in the first place. They never were actually vegan." And it's like, it's giving cope. It's not helpful. What is that doing? Who is that benefiting? Like, besides your own ego, I don't see who that helps. And like, I think even if it's like, yeah, their motivation was ethics or it was a combination of things, like people do things that are against their ethics. People find ways to just accommodate mentally things that they want to do. We are just people, and people do shitty things. People do things that people find ways to rethink things and evolve, and I don't think it's fair to say that they were never vegan. I also don't really understand people getting frustrated when they are asked if they are still vegan. um I can understand that when you are very motivated and driven by your concern and your understanding for the animals, that it can be hard to imagine that you would ever not be vegan. But it happens so often that people will know somebody who is vegan and they stopped being vegan for whatever reason. And like, I myself get curious. I have been asked it by other vegans. Like, it's not something that I think we should take offense to. It's just like a human curiosity. And it does happen. People do decide, you know what, yeah, I want to be vegan, or sometimes they kind of slip into a less official label. They're somewhere between like vegetarian, mostly plant-based, but not totally aligned with the veganism thing. Feel your feelings. If you feel annoyed, if you feel frustrated, that's okay. I just don't understand it. Another thing I just want to add to the food thing is when people claim that vegan alternatives taste just as good or are just as good as the animal derived equivalent. Um Sometimes I will say they are great. Like I do like the Beyond Meat stuff. I've tried like the Impossible Meat stuff. That stuff tastes good. But it is expensive. It's not something that's super attainable for a lot of people. And like, some of the options are still so shit. Recently in Canada, one of the companies that was really big for having like veggie meats, basically, mock meats that were very easy to access, that were at no price point. That company is no longer like a thing. That branch, they just like shut down that whole line. So my partner was looking for an alternative for that brand, and it was like for they're like veggie slices, and the one that he got was so bad. I was like, that you should be embarrassed that you're selling this. Like some of these alternatives, it's embarrassing. It is so bad. And I'm not saying like everybody has the same taste or anything, but to say that they are as good, it's not a blanket statement that you can make. You can say some of them are good, some of the like, I really like a good, like, cashew nut cheese. Those hit really good. I'm not gonna say they taste just like cheese, they don't, they have their own thing, and I really like things that aren't really trying to be a complete mockery. Like, I like a good bean burger. I love a good, like, other type of veggie burger that isn't really trying to be meat. I love those kind of things. I love falafels. I think it would be really beneficial to focus a lot on those types of things too, where it's not a direct comparison, because sometimes when you're doing a direct comparison, like, I'm sorry, the vegan option is pretty shit. And in terms of this swapping of like things, I am kind of on the fence in terms of how I feel about the textile side of things. Like, in terms of leather and wool use, I don't love the practices behind those things, but from a longevity standpoint, I have a hard time with having a firm opinion, because ultimately, I think fast fashion is shitty. I hate pleather. Like, just plasticky, leather-looking stuff that just sheds plastics all over the place. They look bad after, like, not a very long amount of time. They just, like, shed this crap everywhere. Um, they're just not great. I do love and I support the idea fully of companies that are looking for very durable materials that are resembling leather, acting similarly to them, but are made from other materials like cactus, pineapple, mushroom, grapes. I just haven't really seen those things around in what I am looking for. I got one pair of boots with the pineapple leather like years ago, and I liked those, but they didn't fit me the greatest. So I haven't really had a chance to explore with those types of alternatives, but they're still not like massively available. There's still that shitty fake plastic leather that I see far more often. So, like, for me, it's like ideally just avoid leather type things, but there are times that like it's kind of hard not to. You know, for like a good safety boot, sometimes for work you're just going to have to get the leather pair. Sometimes for like safety gloves, leather kind of works the best for certain instances. Um I will admit one of the areas that I did kind of make an exception for myself was with a pair of shoes that fit me perfectly. I do view footwear kind of as healthwear. Like, I wear barefoot, kind of minimal style shoes, and they can be hard to find. They can be hard to find and be able to try on so that you're not needing to deal with like returns and stuff like that. Affordability is also a factor. So, like for me, I did make an exception there because they were like the most perfect fitting shoe that I had ever tried. So I don't love that. I don't love that it's made of leather, but like at, on the other hand, like you need shoes. You in the society we live in, you got to put your feet in something for a lot of context. Keep holding on to things, thrifting things, get finding ways to get these things secondhand is ideal. But for some of these, it's going to be hard to find your size in secondhand. Like for shoes, especially like the type of shoe that I am looking for, it's probably not going to happen. Sometimes there is just a situation where there is no better vegan alternative that is accessible to you. Again, I don't want to support those practices. It's not something that I like the idea of at all, but sometimes there just is not a great other option. And I would rather people be motivated to try to avoid where they can rather than being so tied up by the perfection side of things that they are intimidated to even try to even stick with the other sides of things, or that they're like so tied to a label that like if they do make an exception that makes sense for their life, that they're like feeling a lot of guilt about it. Um, I will also say, like, I have tried to work on for myself if there is a situation where I have been accidentally served something with like dairy or eggs in it, I would eat it. If there was a situation where like something was going to be thrown out and it had dairy or eggs in it, I would probably try a bite of it or something. Um, as long as it's not like adding to the impact, if it's not like something that um, is contributing, if it's already going to be food waste, if I didn't eat it, that sort of thing. Allowing myself to do those things, to consume that, has kind of helped my relationship to veganism a little bit. It's given me a little bit of a healthier relationship to imperfection and finding your own things that make sense for your life. Because I think sometimes you can get like really, for me at least, like there were things that like I would be so anal about or I'd be so upset if I like made a mistake. And it doesn't really benefit anyone when I was feeling that intense of a guilt. When you're doing what you can, when you are trying to be intentional, I think it's important to not strive for perfection so much that we get lost from thinking about what makes sense for us and what makes sense for the reality that we are living in, and also like where our impact is going to be. Like, I can understand the argument for like, if you're hanging out with a bunch of people and there's a bunch of non-vegan food, um, consuming that out in the open is gonna, like, show that you're okay with it, kind of that you, like, are not as committed or whatever. So, like, I can understand it from, like, an image standpoint for those things, but every once in a while, a little bite of something, probably not the worst thing. Also, in terms of, like, creators, I think it's really good to be intentional about what you're consuming. Not all of them are great. Not all of them are healthy to be watching, honestly. Like, there are some, the, raw vegan area of things, do not recommend it, do not love that. Yeah, there's some that are straight up just not healthy, spewing misinformation, just full of bullshit. And there's some that I just don't think are mentally the best for everyone. Like there's, certain types of like reaction commentaries type stuff that I think can sometimes get you into a very like negative headspace. So I do try to be careful with that type of content. Um and even with recipes, I really suggest following people who have well-balanced examples of recipes that can be like a very satiating and satisfying meal that is not too hard to make. I think it's so important to find creators that make food that you would actually want to make. There's like the food that is like maybe once in a while, you have a get together or something and you're going to try and like put some extra time into things. And there's some creators who, like, their whole recipe, like, I have bought books of, like, recipes where they're all too much effort for anything beyond we are making something special for, like, a get-together. I love Sam Turnbull. I find her, like, work to food taste payoff is so good. Like, almost always worth the effort. Plant You is also pretty good with like making stuff look really good, but showing things that you can make quite simply or showing stuff that you can make from like things you would throw out. I also really enjoy creators that are playing around more in that experimental space around food where they will try things, see if it works. I think there's so much to learn from those type of cooking videos. Another thing that bothers me is like if vegans talk shit about vegetarians. It doesn't make sense to me. I just don't think it looks good. I don't think it makes veganism approachable. Vegetarians who also want to eat somewhere where they have lots of options, might support vegan businesses. They might support more of these plant-based options that happen to be vegan. They might be more willing to try things but not want to stick to that label. I don't think it benefits animals to make yourself prickly about vegetarians. A lot of people go vegetarian before they decide to shift towards a plant-based diet or veganism. So I think vegetarian eating is an approachable step for many people. It's also the most obvious. Like, in terms of seeing harm, it's a lot easier to see harm to an animal that is killed for its meat um, than to like comprehend what goes on in the dairy industry, for example, what goes on in the egg industry, especially when you're getting like eggs from the supermarket kind of thing. So as I was recording this video, I did get a little cut off where I could segue into conclusion and just finish this video off. So I'm just going to throw that in here now. If you are still here, thank you so much for being here. I hope that this was a welcoming space for you, wherever you are in terms of your opinions on veganism, wherever you are in terms of your experiences with veganism. I know that we may not all agree, and that is okay. But I hope that we can find some common ground in terms of values that we do share, or in terms of things that we can at least see from another person's perspective. We are better at approaching problems. We are better at making an impact when there's more of us. So I think it's important not to isolate ourselves too much, to disconnect ourselves too much. And one thing that I think can sometimes lead to some disconnect is seeing other people as immoral or bad if they're not vegan. We all change at different paces. We all have different realities that we're living in. And we all have blind spots. We all have exceptions. We need to try and find areas that we do agree, areas that we can get along, and hold on to those in this time when things are constantly trying to disconnect us and distract us and get us mad. There are many other issues that are going on. There are different angles we can look at this stuff from. We can look at like worker protections. How do we make sure that people have more safeguards so the shit that's happening in slaughterhouses is not happening? How do we look at even like reporting certain emissions and the things that are going into our soil or water? What requirements there are for dealing with certain aspects related to the animal agriculture industry. I think there's lots of different angles that people can get involved in that don't involve veganism. Veganism is not perfect. Veganism is not even like the solution to some of these issues. I don't think there's any one right way to be involved. So let me know what your thoughts are. Please try to be respectful in any comments. I don't think attacking people or being cruel is a good approach at all. I don't think shaming people is a good approach. But yeah, I am curious as to other people's takes. If you and where you are kind of on the spectrum of things. Do you eat meat? Do you not eat meat? Do you identify as anything vegan, vegetarian, plant-based? Are you curious? Do you have any did any of your thoughts change at all? Have you been reflecting on any of this stuff? I'm curious as to other people's takes on this stuff. Thanks. Take care. Bye.